Hey everyone, so let's think about something for a second. You've got the right to protest, right? Absolutely. But what happens if that protest blocks an ambulance? That's the kind of tricky situation we're jumping into today. We're talking about that constant push and pull between our individual rights and our shared responsibilities. It's this incredible balancing act that's really at the heart of American life. So let's dive in. Okay, let's just get right to the big question. Are your rights unlimited? I mean, can you just say anything you want anytime? Can you assemble anywhere? The short answer is no. And figuring out why that is, well, that's the key to understanding how our whole society works. You know, the best way to think about it is like a coin. On one side, you have your rights. On the other, you have your responsibilities. They are totally, completely inseparable. You just can't have one without the other. And we're about to break down exactly what that means. All right, so let's take that coin and look at side one. Let's talk about rights. What are they really? So, what is a right? Well, at its core, a right is basically a shield. Think of it like that. It's a protection guaranteed by law that tells the government, hey, back off. You can't intrude on this part of a person's life. It's the government itself saying, this space is yours, and we promise not to interfere. And when you look at some of the big ones, freedom of speech, the right to assemble, the right to vote or even hold public office, what's so fascinating is that they're all about participation. These aren't passive things. They are the actual tools we're given to help shape our own society and, to keep our leaders in check. And this is a really, really important point. These protections, they're not just for dealing with the federal government in Washington, D.C. Nope. Thanks to something called the 14th Amendment, the whole Bill of Rights applies to your state and local governments too. So your freedom of speech is just as protected when you're talking to your city council as it is anywhere else. Okay, we've spent some time on one side of the coin. Now it's time to flip it over. Let's talk about the other, equally crucial side, our civic responsibilities. So, think of it this way. If rights are what you get, responsibilities are what you give. They're the things we all agree to do for each other and for society as a whole. And honestly, they're what make our rights mean anything at all. They're the guardrails that make sure my freedom doesn't end up crushing yours. And you can almost think of these as the pillars that hold up the whole building. You've got respecting the rule of law, right? That keeps things from descending into chaos. Then there's paying taxes, which funds everything we rely on. Roads, schools, you name it. We also have to accept responsibility for our own actions. That's just basic accountability. And finally, serving the nation, whether that's through the military or community service. Seriously, you take away any one of these pillars, and the whole structure of our rights starts to look pretty shaky. All right, this is where it gets really interesting. This is where the two sides of the coin really meet. We've talked about rights, we've talked about responsibilities. Now let's actually connect the dots and see how they pair up. So let's take a huge one, freedom of speech. Of course, you have the right to say what you think. That's fundamental. But the other side of that coin is the responsibility to engage in civil discourse. To actually debate and listen and disagree respectfully, not just try to scream louder than the other person. The right gives you a voice. The responsibility is what makes that voice useful. Oh, and this one is such a perfect example of how this works. You have the right to a trial by a jury of your peers. Fantastic, right? But where do those peers come from? They come from us, from regular citizens doing their duty and serving on a jury when they get that notice in the mail. One of these things literally can't exist without the other. Okay, what about the right to vote? You can think of it like the engine of our democracy. But what good is an engine without fuel? That fuel is being informed. The responsibility that comes with voting is to actually know what's going on, to understand the issues. That's how we make sure we're steering the country with some real thought and not just running on fumes or bad information. And look, this same principle applies to the Second Amendment too. The right to bear arms comes hand in hand with the massive responsibility of being a safe, knowledgeable owner. That means you've got to understand the laws, you need to get proper training, and you have to handle that firearm in a way that keeps not just yourself safe, but everyone in the community safe too. So why does any of this matter? Because this isn't just some textbook theory, It's a real, living thing. Understanding this link, this great balancing act, is absolutely essential because it plays out every single day in our public lives. And if you remember just one thing, let it be this. Individual rights are relative, not absolute. I'll say it again because it's that important. They are relative, not absolute, which means simply your rights have limits. So where's the line? Well, you've probably heard the old saying, your right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins. That's pretty much it. And this is not a new concept. Way back in 1919, the Supreme Court made that famous ruling. You know the one. You can't falsely shout fire in a crowded theater. Why? Because a functioning society is all about this constant negotiation, balancing your personal freedom with the safety and well-being of everybody else, the common good. So I'm going to leave you with this to think about. Where do you see this balancing act happening in your own community? Is it in local zoning laws, or maybe at those heated school board meetings? How about in debates over public health? I promise, once you start looking for it, you'll see that two-sided coin everywhere, constantly being flipped and argued over. Thanks so much for tuning in.